So it's all about the music. It's about the sound. Now Jacobs talks about, he said it's just like speech. So how many of you are parents here? How did you teach your children how to speak?
Mimicry.
So you gave them the sound of words.
Mm-hmm.
You mean you didn't have charts, diagrams, and graphs?
I tried real hard.
They would be speechless.
Hey!
They would be speechless if you put an anatomical chart in front of them and started to talk about diaphragmatic lift and intercostal muscles. How many of you have seen your diaphragm? Nobody. And you don't want to see it. Ever. Intercostal muscles, that's the rib cage. We don't care about that. Everything that we do in life, except for one thing, begins with failure. We're very good, right from the moment of birth, at one thing. And what is that?
Breathing.
Breathing! And what motivates the first breath?
Survival.
They scream! Sound is what motivates that breath. We play instruments. The audience doesn't care about your fingering of your instrument or the slide position. They don't care how you feel. They don't care if you're happy today, sad today, that it feels good when you play the trombone, or it feels awful. One of my friends described, Svianovich, had a beautiful description of what it feels like to play the trumpet when he's not locked in. Feels like I'm trying to push a piano up the stairs. And we've all had that experience. We've all had the experience where it just felt awful. As a matter of fact, most of the people who come to me want to feel good. My playing feels terrible, and help me. And I said, I will help you. But how you feel is not a motivator. How you sound is what motivates. And feel is a byproduct. So yes, you will feel good. You will feel better. I never tell them they feel good. You'll feel better after you are committed to the music. Now, if you're not familiar with Adolf Herseth, I was fortunate, one of the greatest influences on my life. I can't even describe to you the experience of being in a room with this man. And this is Tim Kent, a good friend of mine, who played fourth trumpet in the CSO. And he studied with Herseth and wrote this book. It's called Within the Sphere of the Master. Is that a student who's just paying tribute to his teacher? It's incredible. But Herseth, Thomas told me this story about a trumpet player who complained to Herseth about his chops. And this is a prominent trumpet player. I won't mention the name or anything. He was very successful, but he made a mistake of complaining to Herseth about how his chops felt. And Bud, in a typical fashion, what are you complaining about? My chops haven't felt good for 30 years. Did it matter? No. But anyway, published in this book is a funny picture. And I don't know if you can see it. I'll kind of pass it around here. This one right here, where he makes a funny face with his chops. He distorts his chops. He makes a funny face with that. And here's what the caption is. Here's the picture right here. He says, "This is what my chops feel like after the concert." But he doesn't say, "This is what my chops feel like during the concert." Because if he was worried about how his chops felt during the concert, he couldn't play. And there's an interesting story that I'll share with you. Actually, there's so many of them. I was very fortunate to be around these people. So, like 10 stories going through my head right now. We're doing Mahler Fifth. Schulte used to like to do Mahler Fifth on tour. Big blow for the brass. Come on. But he had an encore list of maybe 10 or 12 pieces that nobody knew what he was going to call at the end of Mahler Fifth in Berlin or something. So the first part of the program was probably something lighter, and so Bud decided, well, maybe I should warm up on the piccolo a little bit. Couldn't play. Nothing was happening. He calls Charlie Geiger over, who was the second trumpet at the time, and says, listen, if he calls for the Brandenburg, be prepared to play. But then something happened. He started to think about all his successful performances of music. He started to think, I played it here, it was beautiful, I played it over there, it was beautiful, I played it then. And as he began to think about his successful performances, a change occurred in his brain, in his mind. And his playing started to recover. Sure enough, after the Mahler Fifth, Brandenburg, and he played his usual excellent performance. But what changed? Did the trumpet change? No. Did the music change? No. What changed was his state of mind. My theory on this was that he had the piccolo in his hand to play Brandenburg, but he was still thinking about Mahler and C trumpet. His brain was Mahler and C trumpet, and you can't go. The difference in feel was a distraction from him. But when he got back to the music, now here's the most powerful story. He was involved early on in his career at the Chicago Symphony in a horrible automobile accident. And his, I don't know if any of you ever saw the inside of his mouth, but the teeth were misformed, they were brown because he smoked a pipe and all. And his brother was a dentist, or a surgeon, an oral surgeon, and he said, don't touch, don't do anything. And they told him, take a year off from the orchestra. Well, there's something about those people at that time, and that influence is still there. And there's something about their will. No, I'm not going to go play golf for a year. I'm going to continue. Now here's the scene. Beethoven 9, Chicago Symphony, Sunday afternoon. At that time, they used to broadcast those concerts on television live. I did one of them. My first concert with them was the Rachmaninoff Variations, Paganini Variations. And he's warming up in his little studio in Oak Park over there, which he lived his entire career in Chicago in the same house. And he can't play. Nothing. Can't play. Now most people are going to do this. Mr. Personnel Manager, have somebody else play. It's not working today, I can't do it. No! He had the courage to show up on that Sunday afternoon. Fritz Reiner, Beethoven 9, broadcast all over Chicago. And guess what? He could play. And that was a pivotal moment in his career, because he realized that if he focused on the music rather than how awful he felt, he could play. And that was the secret. And we cannot play by feel or input or what am I doing? Sensory information to the brain. Our brains work beautifully. Our nervous system works beautifully, but only in one direction. And I have an illustration here. So tube. And we know that we can make water flow through the tube powerfully in one direction, or air can flow powerfully in one direction, or we can make it flow in the other direction. But what happens if we try to make water flow in both directions at the same time in the tube? You hit a wall. And this is how our minds work, our nervous system works. We're very good at taking in information through the sensors. We're very good at sending information from the brain to the muscle tissues. It's called motor function. But when we try to excel at both at the same time, we hit the wall. The input blocks the output. How do I feel? What am I doing? Prevents your brain from sending a message to respond, to create sound. And you become paralyzed. How many of you have ever had a moment of paralysis with an instrument in your hand? Come on, let's be honest. Everybody in the room has.
Yes.
And you wondered why. Why did that happen? Thomas played in one of the orchestras. He sent a trumpet player to me. And you know who I'm talking about, Thomas. Or if he's back there. And he walked into my home. I had a studio in my basement. And he says, Roger, I have bad news. I just came from the doctor and he said there's nothing wrong with my chops. And you know what I said? That's the good news. Let's go. Let's go. It wasn't about his chops. It's not about the embouchure. How many of you, most of you are horn players, I imagine. How many of you have seen the Farkas pictures of the 25 horn embouchure? They're all over the place. And then Farkas said something that I don't think he got the message himself. But he said, these were all successful players. They all could play well. Some of them had almost no lower lip. Some of them had almost no upper lip. Some of them played like a trumpet. Equal amounts of upper and lower lip. But they were all successful players because it wasn't about the perfect horn embouchure. It's about something else. Do we have we do have a ladder. Can we get that ladder out here? That ladder's very, very important to what we're doing here today.
Watch out for the light fixture behind you.
Now, this is better than the one we had last time, which was the 12-step stool. Perfect. Does anybody know what this ladder is called? Besides, the obvious thing is a step ladder from, it's a Werner's step ladder. Let me say what I call this ladder. Anybody have any idea? Okay, well, I'm going to tell you what it's called. It's called the ladder of awareness. Awareness of what? Your chops? Your breathing? Your tongue? Your throat? How many of you had somebody say to you, open your throat? And you're laughing with me. You're laughing with me. How many of you have heard somebody say to you, fill the instrument with air? What's wrong with saying fill the instrument with air?
Air's already
It's already full of air. Oh, then they get, when I call them on that, they get rattled like a warm air. Okay, for warm air. Fast air? You've heard all that stuff. And Mr. Jacobs is asked, how do you fill this enormous tuba with air? And by the way, it's a myth that he had one lung. You've probably heard about that myth.
Yes.
It's not true, but he was a severe asthmatic and he had reduced lung capacity. And the reason that he went to the big tuba because it was a bigger amplifier. That was the reason. It was the only reason he went to the. Now everybody in the world plays these horns, by the way, copies of them, and everybody's playing the big horns now. But that was the only reason. He said, "I don't fill it with air. I fill it with sound. I fill it with sound. Any sound? Well, you can fill it with any sound, more or less. But when you're playing the Bruckner 7th Symphony or the Bruckner 4th Symphony or the 8th Symphony, Bruckner wrote specific notes there. So you have to play those specific notes. And does the tuba know anything about the notes? No! The tuba has no sound of its own. The trombone, the horn, the trumpet, they're mindless tubes. Mindless tubes that have no intelligence, no music, but they have plenty of air. So, it's not about filling the instrument with air. Those of you who are teachers, talk to your students and say, hey, fill that instrument with sound. Fill the instrument with sound. Now, let's talk about the origins of the sound. Where's the sound going to come from? The tuba knows nothing about it. The tuba doesn't know anything about the sound. And we come to a very, very good friend of mine and a lot of people in the world. His name is Sergio Carolino. And here's a picture of Sergio on the back. And I'm going to share a little story with you. Gene Piccone asked me to, he called me up and he said, listen, go down and,
I knew that was going to happen.
Sergio is playing at the University of Illinois. Go check him out. Okay. I only lived maybe an hour from there. It's not too bad. Went down, sat on the stage with a group of students. It was only the tuba euphonium students that came to this recital, which was a shame. The entire university should have been there. But that's the way it goes now. So, anyway, he played a magnificent recital of 4 pieces that were written specifically for him that no one else in the world can play. I'm not kidding you. I am deadly serious about this. No one else can play the stuff that these composers write for him. And then on top of that, it was the most, he did some sections of improvisation. It was the most powerful, thunderous improvisation I'd ever heard in my life. So at the end of the 4th piece, he stands, the people on the stage stand. I ran up to him. He didn't know who I was. And I didn't care. I didn't care about what, if everybody was going to be upset that I ran up to him and said these words. I looked him in the eye and I said, I call that transcending the instrument. And he looked back at me and he was either startled by the words or the fact that this person he didn't know came up running up to him, or both. But those words were the seeds of a great friendship. I call that transcending the instrument. It wasn't about tuba playing. It was not about tuba playing. It was about incredible music making. Incredible music making. That's the secret. You know, he told me, he said, well, I'm going to write this book and I'm going to call it Mind versus Metal. If you don't influence the metal will influence you. It's a one-way street. You can't have it both ways. So, how do you influence the metal? By sending sound into the lead pipe. Not just any sound, but sending sound into the lead pipe. If you don't do that, then the metal influences the brain. And that's paralysis. The metal will paralyze us if we're not musically aware and committed. And that's the secret. That's what this whole session is about. It's about being musically aware and then committed to that music. Now I'm going to ask, who's going to do the video for me?
I think it's me. This video.
You ready to go?
Yeah, sure.